Okay, cool. We should be coming through live now. And if we are, I'll just double check. But hello and welcome to Joshua J Poker. I am, of course, Joshua J. And on this channel, we are documenting my journey up through the cash game streets and sharing things that I learn along the way. And also things that I'm learning with clients, as I am a poker mindset and performance coach. So anything that I learn with those guys and girls, obviously, I'm going to be sharing as much as I can on this channel that makes sense. And with that said, in this episode, I want to talk about how to create more luck in your poker game and give yourself more confidence when you go to play. And the reason I want to share this is because I hear a lot of people when I stream on Twitch, people type in the chat box, people messaging me, people in Discord, and just generally my experience over the last few years within the poker world is that one thing that's really holding people back is their perception of luck, if they are a lucky player, an unlucky player, all of these different things. And from my experience as a coach and coach myself is that if you can tweak a few little parts of your mindset and approach the game in a slightly different way, then you can start to feel better. You can start to create more luck and start to feel better in your games, and then therefore lead to an increase in your long-term win rate, which is absolutely what we want. It's something we should all be striving for if we're playing, even if we're recreational players. So with that said, this is obviously a live experience. So if you do have any questions as we go, please pop them in the chat and I'll get to them. And if you're watching this on replay, thank you for being here, and know that all comments that you leave will also be answered too. So what I want to talk about today is how the concept of luck in itself is just a feeling, or it's just a perspective. Like it's 100% something that is intangible, meaning we can't hold luck. We can't grab onto it. So luck is just a feeling, or it's a perspective. And if we understand that, it means that it's something that we can leverage to really make ourselves feel empowered. And I want to give you an example. Like the easiest one is that, say we're playing, I was going to say we're playing cash, but this would apply anywhere. Say you get kings in versus aces pre-flop. Aces is an 81.94% favor, depending on the suits that you choose. And we can't change that, we have no control over that. We have no control on the outcome long term, unless you're playing on a rig site or something that's not legit. That's going to be how the cards run out. You're going to win 81.94% of the time if you've got aces. You're going to lose the rest of the time if you have kings. That's just how it's going to be. So if we can't change that, all we can change is how we respond to that, and if we can change how we respond to that well long term, it means that we can actually create more luck in our games because we'll stop feeling so unlucky. And that's a really big thing to understand, is that if you're always feeling unlucky, it means that you haven't made the chance and you haven't made the space to actually feel lucky in what you're doing. And if you realize that it isn't a tangible thing, like it's not like a pen or it's not something you can hold, luck is just a perspective. So if you know that and you can choose which way you're going to look at it, you can choose to create a perspective where we are lucky or you are lucky. I don't know exactly how to phrase that, but you know what I mean, is that if you know it's intangible and you know that there's things you can't control, but one of the things you can control is your perception, why wouldn't you choose, why wouldn't you choose to be a luckier player? Why wouldn't you choose to associate as a lucky player? So that's kind of the first thing. And I want to show you the opposite example of why you should choose that perspective of what would happen if you choose to identify as an unlucky player. Because the first way to start creating more luck in your game is to start identifying as a lucky player. And that's not a bad thing. We'll get to that in a minute. But let's look at the identifying as an unlucky player. And this is something that I see all the time in Twitch chat. I see it all the time in forums, anywhere I spend time, is that people are, oh, I'm so unlucky. Every time that I get this versus this happens and I lose. Every time I raise the river, they always have it. Every time I I'm an unlucky player. And if you think about that, as humans, how we identify is very, very powerful. And the way that we view ourselves and how we think of ourselves dictates how we act. It dictates how we respond to different things. So if we are branding ourselves as an unlucky player, it doesn't really matter what happens. It doesn't actually matter what happens in the game, which, as we know, is very high variance anyway. Our subconscious mind is very, very powerful. And what it will do, it will search for evidence to support the argument of your self-identification. So if you identify as an unlucky person and you really feel it, you believe it, that's something that you are, and then you get aces versus kings, rather than being able to be objective and being like, oh, well, that's kind of just a pretty standard spot, your subconscious mind will be like, look, there's more evidence. We're so unlucky. We're such an unlucky player. And the spiral effect of that is that we go downward, we spiral down, because if we're an unlucky player and then bad things are happening, then, oh God, like we're going to feel bad about ourselves. If anything goes wrong, we're going to resort to feeling bad. And if you're feeling bad because you associate as an unlucky player, then it doesn't really matter what happens on the table. You're going to really, really struggle to win long term. You know, like just think about that, like zoom out and compare two people. One is sat there feeling really good. They have the perspective that they're a lucky player. They feel good about what they're doing. They understand the variance, compared to somebody who's like, God, I'm so unlucky. Man, this always happens. Oh, like, look at this. Like, oh, how's that happened again? I'm so unlucky. Oh, of course he's got a set. I'm so unlucky. You know, like, who do you think out of those two players is going to win the most money over a million hands? You know, and even though that may seem, I suppose when I explain that out, it is quite an obvious like solution, is to just start identifying as a lucky player, because you can choose to do so, you know, and if you choose to do that, then naturally you will find evidence to support yourself being a lucky player. And that's really good, because then when things go right for you, you know, like say you, I don't know, river a 2-outer, or you river a flush versus a smaller flush, your subconscious mind will then be like, oh yeah, but obviously that's happened because we're a lucky player and we're a winning player, and we identify as that. So do you see how it's like the exact same event, but because we change our perspective, it's really, really powerful to be able to do that. And it's something that you should definitely be doing, in my opinion, if you want to become a long-term winning player. And again, everything I share on this channel are just my thoughts. Take from this what you will, and adapt it to your game as you want. This also stops the self-fulfilling prophecy from happening. And a self-fulfilling prophecy is something that we believe. And because we believe it, again, it doesn't really matter what happens. We just find the evidence to support it. And I've had this in my game where, and you'll see me do this on stream, where I always think they've got aces pre-flop. As soon as I change that to be like, oh, well, if they do have it, that's okay. They're not always going to have it. I actually feel way better in the game, and I actually feel lucky because they seem to have it less, because the self-fulfilling prophecy doesn't happen as often. So that's like the first way to create more luck, is just identify as a lucky player. There's nothing wrong with that. Your ego may be a little bit bruised, especially if like you worry about what other people think, but that's a video for a story for another video, is that it's absolutely okay to identify as a lucky player. And one guy that does this better than anybody I know is Charlie Carroll. He's won absolutely zillions, and he talks about this a lot, how he identifies as that. You'll hear him do it on his stream. And because he does that, he thinks he's going to run good, and he thinks he's going to run better. So he actually does do those things, and his results show for themselves. So that's the first thing. And if you want to further develop this skill, I want to give you some techniques now that you can use to increase the luck, create more luck, and feel better and win more. And the first one is something that you'll hear me do loads on stream. And this is something you can use in life, and it's called reframing or relensing, either or, it's the same thing. So I'll give you an example. And I did have a hand loaded, but I forgot to load it because I was streaming just before this. But anyway, so I'll give you an example of the hand I was going to show you. Is that we have pocket kings in the big blind. This is a cash game example. Under the gun opens, who has 75 big blinds. We're in the big blinds with pocket kings. It folds to us. We raise, they call. The flop comes 10, deuce, 3. We bet. They shove for their remaining 65 big blinds. We obviously snap call, and they have pocket twos, so they flop a set. So that's the event. That's what's happened, and that's out of our control. You know, that just is what's going to happen. So the way that we can reframe that or re-lens it is, one lens we could look through is the unlucky, I'm really sad, I'm going to be a loser, I'm not going to feel good about this, I'm going to play worse and spiral down. Or we can find the good aspects of that and find the positives in that scenario. Because when I see that scenario or hear it, immediately I think, well, at least he didn't have 100 big blinds. At least we saved money in a pretty standard spot, where versus a reg who would have had 100 big blinds, we just saved ourselves 35 big blinds. And then that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, oh, well, this guy probably didn't have 100 big blinds because he's probably not a reg. It means he's a recreational player. So at least I've given money to somebody who's going to give it back to the poker economy. He's probably going to play more because he now feels good. He's probably going to deposit more long term. And that's good for me, because long term I'm going to beat him more than he's going to beat me. And they were just the first two. But do you see how that reframing, it's the exact same event, but with the second option, I just feel so much more like light and empowered and confident and lucky. And those things can only result to better results, in my opinion. You know, like if I was like raging, oh my fucking God, this fish has got a set. Oh, like, oh, I'm so unlucky. Like I can't really imitate that because I don't know how to do it that well. But do you see how it's the exact same thing, but because we've relensed it or reframed it? I don't know why I'm doing this. It's like, you can't see me. But because we've reframed it and looking at it through a different lens, it doesn't change. It changes the way we play for the positive outcome. And if you do that over 10,000 hands, you're going to win. You do it over 100,000 hands, it's going to get better and better and better. And that is just something that I really think you should be trying, is look at it through those lenses, because you have the power to do so. And you have the choice to have the perspective as you being a lucky player. My light's just gone off. We've had some trouble with this light today. I'm not overly happy with it considering it's brand new and it just keeps dying, but we'll put this one here. I apologize. So that's the first thing, is reframing, sorry. The second thing that is super, super good when you're in game is to always recenter yourself to a constant that makes you feel good. You know, again, as players in the session, we can just like kind of lose track of where we are. We could be like 2 hours in and then you've kind of like forgotten if you're even a lucky player or you're even playing well or doing any of those things. So if you can find something to recenter yourself and remind you that you are a lucky player and you do run well and you do feel good about yourself and you are a winning player and all of those things, and center it into something. If you're a visual learner like I am and you need to figure this out for yourself, I have things here. I have this. I have like a dice, 27-sided dice. So whenever I see that, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm pretty lucky, because for some reason, if I roll that, I seem to pick the letter more often than I don't pick the letter. It's kind of weird, but that's the frame I see it through. So part of the caveat of this is that you may feel that you're lying to yourself, or they may see you're deceiving yourself, but you're absolutely not. You know, you have the choice to, remember, we said right at the start, you have the choice to adopt whichever perspective works for you. So why not just adopt the perspective that makes you win more money? Like, that's a pretty plus EV decision, in my opinion. So if you can recenter that and find something, and then every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, however long it is during your session, you refocus, you look at that thing and you're like, fuck, this is great. You know, nothing can really hurt me. I'm a winning player. I'm plus EV, etc., etc. The next technique to increase luck and create more luck in your games is to set yourself up to be lucky. And this is something that's kind of like so multifaceted. I'm just going to try and give it my best shot. But if you are playing scared because you feel and you associate as an unlucky player, it's very likely that when you have big draws, when you have, and I'm talking mainly about cash games because I don't really play tournaments, and I guess a lot of people watching this play cash games anyway. But if you have big draws, you have a lot of equity, you have to set yourself up to realize that equity. And what that may mean is going all in when you don't have a made hand, and going all in when you're trying to make the guy have fold equity. And this is multifaceted because I don't want to go too deep into the ranges, but I remember, I'll give you an anecdotal story because it's probably better for me, is I never used to go all in or really do anything unless I had a made hand. And because I was doing that, I always felt unlucky, because if I always had a made hand and went all in, it meant that my opponent could improve versus my hand, and therefore I'd only ever lose. And I was always trying to hold on, if that makes sense. So for example, I would only ever get it in with a flush. Opponent gets it in with a set. He can improve to a full house. I can't, if that makes sense. So every time I lost, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm fucking so unlucky. How does this keep happening? I'm so unlucky. But then when I realized, but I'm the guy that doesn't get it in without the nuts, so I don't set myself up to run my equity out to then be quote unquote lucky, even though it's not really lucky in that example, but it will feel like it is. So the takeaway from that is, if you have a lot of equity and a big combo draw and something that's like, okay, get this in, you need to learn to get it in. And this will come back to bankroll management, a little bit of risk tolerance control, and all the things we're talking about in these videos, because our mind is unfortunately not simple. There's lots of things at play, but you can take from that the context is that if you have a big draw, you have to set yourself up to be lucky. You have to set yourself up to feel that emotion of like, oh, well, I actually got there. because otherwise long term you'll only ever be the guy getting sucked out on. And this is so important when you're moving up stakes, in my opinion. You don't want to be the guy that's always getting quote unquote sucked out on in your unconscious mind, because you're not going to feel good. And because you don't feel good, you're not going to play your best. And because you don't play your best, you're not going to win as much money as you can. Setting yourself up to be lucky is very, very important. And the final thing is a classic. It's a quote by Gary Player. It's something that I seemingly live and breathe because it really makes sense, is that the harder I practice, the luckier I get. You know, and poker is a game of practice and just improving and studying and turning up as the best version of you. And the more of that you do, the more of that you focus on, and the harder you work on that, you will be rewarded. It's kind of like this weird cosmic law. I don't know what you'd call it, but it seems to happen that the players that practice and work harder than the other players are the ones that get luckier. It's the same in all sports where it's a repetitive environment, like poker, like golf, where Gary Player is from. So that's, again, maybe a lot of what I teach is simple because I'm a fucking very simple person. But if you take these concepts into your game and you reframe your situation, you choose to have the perspective of a lucky player and identify as a lucky player and start to tell yourself that. And you'll hear me do this on stream, like, man, I'm so fucking lucky. Oh my God, no one runs better than me. This is great. Like, oh God, I can get this in and I can win. If you can do that, and then if you can recenter yourself to make yourself feel that way throughout the session, so you're not just like going through 2 hours of your session without ever even thinking about who you wanted to be in the session. If you're not scared to run your equities and you're not scared to realize and don't underestimate fold equity, and if you just practice and work harder than your opponents, all of those 4 things will long-term make you create more luck in this game. It'll make you feel way better. Because you feel better, you're going to win more. And because you win more, you're going to feel better. So it's a beautiful, positive cycle. And I'd really, really suggest trying some of those things. And if you do try some of those things, please, please let me know. You know, like sometimes when I make these videos, some of the shit I'm talking about is a bit fucking wacky. I'm very well aware of that. Not many people talk about this stuff on YouTube. So please let me know if it works, as I'd really like to hear that. And the feedback loop for me is good because then I make more videos. And if there's anything you are struggling with performance or mindset wise in the beautiful game of poker, please comment them below. Let me know what you'd like help with on videos, because then I can put content together for you. This was requested by D-Toms in the Discord, as it's something that he learned from the stream passively, and he said it really helped him. So thank you for that, D-Toms. And with that said, this has been Mindset Mondays with Joshua J. Poker. We'll be back on Thursday for some stream highlights. And then it's Christmas. Have a wonderful fucking Christmas if I don't see it before then. But without further ado, thank you all for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here. And I wish you a wonderful rest of your Monday. Peace.